connect to the internet. You can answer any question pretty much instantly, any calculation. Your phone's memory is essentially perfect. You can remember flawlessly. Your phone can remember videos, pictures, and everything perfectly. Your phone is already an extension of you. You're already a cyborg. Most people don't realize they are already a cyborg. That phone is an extension of yourself. It's just that the data rate, the rate at which, or the communication rate between you and the cybernetic extension of yourself that is your phone and computer is slow. It's very slow. And that it's like a tiny straw of information flow between your biological self and your digital self. And we need to make that tiny straw like a giant river, a huge, high bandwidth interface. It's an interface problem, data rate problem. If we solve the data rate problem, then I think we can hang on to human-machine symbiosis through the long term. And then people may decide that they want to retain their biological self or not. I think they'll probably choose to retain their biological self.
Versus some sort of Ray Kurzweil scenario where they download themselves into a computer?
You will be essentially snapshotted into a computer at any time. If your biological self dies, you could probably just upload into a new unit. Literally.
Pass that whiskey. We're getting crazy over here. This is getting ridiculous.
Down the rabbit hole.
Grab that sucker. Give me some of that. This is too freaky. See, if I've
been thinking about this for a long time, by the way.
I believe you have. If I was talking to one of my... Cheers, by the way.
Cheers. Yeah, this is great whiskey.
Thank you. I don't know where this came from. Who brought this to us?
Trying to remember.
Somebody gave it to us.
Yeah.
Old Camp, whoever
It's
it was. Thanks. It's good. Yeah, it is good. This is just inevitable. Again, going back to when you decided to have this fatalistic viewpoint. So you tried to warn people. You talked about this pretty extensively. I've read several interviews where you talked about this, and then you just sort of said, "Okay, it just is. Let's just." And you, in a way, you're by communicating the potential fear. I mean, for sure, you're getting the warning out to some people.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, I was really going on the warning quite a lot. I was warning everyone I could. You ever met with Obama, and just for one reason, like,
Just
watch
talk
out.
about AI.
Yes.
And what did he say? He said, "What about Hillary? Worry about her first." Shh. Everybody be quiet.
No. I met with Congress. I was at a meeting of all 50 governors and talked about just AI danger, and I talked to everyone I could. No one seemed to realize where this was going.
Is it that, or do they just assume that someone smarter than them is already taking care of it? Because when people hear about something like AI, it's almost abstract. It's almost like it's so hard to wrap your head around it. By the time it already happens, it'll be too late.
Yeah, I think they didn't quite understand it, or didn't think it was near term, or not sure what to do about it. And I said, like, an obvious thing to do is to just establish a committee, government committee, to gain insight, before you do oversight, before you do make regulations, just like try to understand what's going on. And then if you have an insight committee, then once they learn what's going on, get up to speed, then they can make maybe some rules or propose some rules. And that would be probably a safer way to go about things.
It seems, I mean, I know that it's probably something that the government's supposed to handle, but it seems like I don't want the government to handle this.
Who do you want to handle it?
I want you to handle this.
Oh, geez.
Yeah. I feel like you're the one who could ring the bell better. Because if Mike Pence starts talking about AI, I'm like, shut up, bitch. You don't know anything about AI. Come on, man. He doesn't know what he's talking about.
Yeah, but I don't have the power to regulate other companies. What am I supposed to?
Right. But maybe companies could agree. Maybe there could be some sort of a. I mean, we have agreements where you're not supposed to dump toxic waste into the ocean. You're not supposed to do certain things that could be terribly damaging, even though they'd be profitable. Maybe this is one of those things. Maybe we should realize that you can't hit the switch on something that's going to be able to think for itself and make up its own mind as to whether or not it wants to survive or not, and whether or not it thinks you're a threat, and whether or not it thinks you're useless. Like, why do I keep this dumb, finite life form alive? Why keep this thing around? It's just stupid. It just keeps polluting everything and shitting everywhere it goes, lighting everything on fire and shooting each other. Why would I keep this stupid thing alive? Because sometimes it makes good music, you know. Sometimes it makes great movies. Sometimes it makes beautiful art, and sometimes it, you know, sometimes it's cool to hang out with. Like,
yes, all those reasons.
Yeah, for us, those are great reasons.
Yes.
But for anything objective, standing outside, like, oh, this is definitely a flawed system. This is like if you went to the jungle and you watch these chimps engage in warfare and beat each other over the head with sticks. They're fucking real mean.
They're freaking mean.
They're real mean.
I saw that movie Chimpanzee. I thought it was going to be like some Disney thing. I was like, holy cow.
What movie was that?
It looks pretty cool, Chimpanzee.
Who is it? A documentary?
Yeah. Yeah, it's kind of like a documentary. I was like, damn, these chimps are mean.
They're mean.
Yeah. They're cruel.
Yeah, they're calculated. Yeah.
Yeah.
They sneak up on each other and.
Like, I didn't realize chimps did calculated cruelty.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
It's pretty. I left that meeting kind of thinking, whoa, this is dark.
Right. Well, we know. Or we're on our way to one. Right. Well, but just because we exist, we could most certainly be on the road. We could be on the road to that. Right. It doesn't mean that it has to have already happened.
We could be in base reality. It could be in base reality.
We could be here now on our way to the road or on our way to the destination where this can never happen again, where we are completely ingrained in some sort of an artificial technology or some sort of a symbiotic relationship with the internet or the next level of sharing information. But right now we're not there yet. That's possible too, right? It's possible that a simulation is one day going to be inevitable, that we're going to have something that's indistinguishable from regular reality. But maybe we're not there yet. That's also possible. That we're not quite there yet. That this is real. When I touch that,
it feels
wood,
very real.
Maybe that's why everybody's like into like mason jars and shit.
Mason jars.
Suede shoes. People are into like craft restaurants and they want raw wood. Everyone wants.
Ultimately, you know, even if we just sort of existed as humans forever.
Comparison to a Tesla.
And then you want to go into this like 2D transport system, which
hugely inefficient,
pretty low density, is to
feel like
information flow between.
Like you're the one who.
Chimp life.
What's that? They have in San Diego.
San Diego.
This real world, the sick.
What?
The police are all. They do a lot of their.
Little company called AC Propulsion.
Amazing that like Rolex is that it's all done mechanically. There's no batteries in there. There's no. No, nothing.
Yeah. Yeah, you could do the same thing, create a little charger that's based on wrist movement. It really depends on how much energy your watch uses.
You know what's fucked up about that, though? We accept a certain amount of, like, fuckery with those watches.
This is Degara Essays, 2-3 page opinion pieces, wordpress.com, anti-business. Belongs almost to a different species compared to a sage who is a whopping 50 IQ points smarter than him. Sages need to teach peakers that peakers cannot expect sages to behave dumber than them, that is, the subs.
Formerly, I was so that a femtometer technology would become possible.
The two groups may have little in common, but at least some degree of peace.
Before that, community. So he and I are an extremely useful, intelligent home robot that could, for example, take the dog for a walk or wash the dishes, clean the house, wash the clothes. You know, a genuinely useful robot. And most people say that would be so useful, they would be prepared to spend more money than for a car. So a lot of money. So this would be a huge industry. Now, what this program is about is the longer term consequences of this industry and the rise of artificial intelligence in general. So the scenario I see as the most plausible, the most realistic is that in the 2020s there will be artificial brain-based home robots that will be very common. There'll be lots of other applications as well, but this will be the one that really talks to most people. It'll be like the means for the masses to become conscious of a growing problem. And what is that problem? Well, let's give it a label. Call it species dominance issue. In other words, as these machines get smarter and smarter and smarter, then people will start worrying, right? Like imagine, well, we're all familiar with Moore's law. So, well, for those who aren't, Moore is a person, Gordon Moore. He's still alive. I think he's in his 80s now. He's pretty old. But in the mid-60s, he noticed a trend in electronics, and that is that the electronics industry was cramming ever more transistors onto a single chip. And in fact, that number that you could put into the chip was doubling roughly every year and a half or so. So Moore noticed this trend, and so this trend has now been labelled Moore's law. And it's been valid for, what, mid-60s, what's that, 45 years, right? So common sense is if you take any number and you multiply it by 2, by 2, by 2, by 2, by 2, you end up with a huge number. So today's chips, and by today's 2010, in today's chips you have billions of transistors on a single chip. Now, that trend will continue at least for another decade or so. And people have been saying, oh, Moore's law is going to run out by a given date, and they get it wrong. It just keeps going. So it looks as though human ingenuity will keep finding ways to extend Moore's law ever longer. But if you extrapolate the trend to about 2020, so 10 years away, then you're putting a single bit of information on one atom. Right? So, well, I've got a plastic bottle of orange juice here. So if I ask you, how many atoms in this bottle of orange juice? So how many bits, if you have 1 bit per atom? And the answer is, anything that's sort of handheld object, if you've done any chemistry from high school, you'll know that the number of atoms is roughly Avogadro's number, and that's That's a trillion atoms. So a trillion bits. Okay? So that's 10 to the power 24. That's a 1 and 24 zeros. So it's a million atoms or bits. Now, if technology is giving us that capacity by around 2020, how fast could one atom switch its state from 0 to 1? It's a bit, right? And the answer is about a femtosecond. Well, how fast is that? Well, it's about 1,000th of a trillionth, so 10 to the minus 15 of a second. It's incredibly fast. So imagine then, in 2020, this orange juice has been nanoteched. I mean, it's been 2020 technologized to the point where every atom in here is functioning as a computer component. Imagine. Okay. So what's the computing capacity then of this handheld object, this bottle of orange juice? And the answer is, well, you can work it out. How many atoms? Well, trillion, that's 10 to the 24. And each atom is switching, let's say roughly 10 to the 16. So what's that? 10,000 trillion times a second. That's each atom. And you've got a trillion atoms. Okay? So do the math, you just multiply those two numbers, and you get 10 to power 40. That's the technology that's coming, right? In a mere 10 years. 10 to power 40. Bit flips per second. All right? Now ask yourself a similar question. What's the equivalent computing capacity of the human brain? How do you calculate that? Well, you can estimate it fairly easily, fairly quickly. How many brain cells do we have in our brains? About 100 billion, more or less. So that's 10 to power 11. Okay, and each brain cell or neuron, as they're called, makes a connection, physical connection, to about roughly, let's say, 10,000 others. So that's 10 to the 4. And each connection, there's a technical word for that connection between two brain cells. It's called a synapse. So each synapse can signal at roughly maximum, say, 10 bits per second. So that's 10 to the 1. So how many bits is all that together? So multiply those three numbers. So 10 to the 11, that's 100 billion brain cells, times 10 to the 4, that's roughly how many connections per brain cell, times 10 to the 1, how many bits per second per synapse. You work that out, it's roughly 10 to power 16. 11 plus 4 plus 1. Okay? 10 to power 16. But can you remember how many bits this was, the machine? 10 to power 40. Okay? So human brain, 10 to power 16. This, the orange juice, 10 to power 40. Now that is a trillion times more than our human brain. So the physicist in me sees the writing on the wall. It's only a question of time before humanity, sooner or later, is confronted with this enormous question: do we allow our machines, our artificial intellects, I call them artilects just for short, so an artilect is a portmanteau word, a shortening of two words, artificial intellect. So these artilects could become trillion times superior to us in their computing capacity. Now you may say, well, flipping a lot of bits is not the same thing as high intelligence, right? And that's true. You need something else as well, and that is you need a knowledge of how our brains become intelligent. What's going on in our brains that makes us intelligent? And the answer is, well, we have to have the appropriate neural circuitry. Now, we don't have that today, not yet. I mean, that knowledge is coming fast, and again, Moore's law is creating new tools to help us understand how the brain works. So we can take that knowledge from neuroscience and put it into the neuroengineering. So then we can have these artificial brains becoming more and more similar to real brains, our own human brain, and speeding up the whole process by a factor of 1,000,000, because our brain cells, they communicate at chemical speeds, maximum about 100 meters a second. But an electronic brain would communicate at the speed of light. Right? That's about 1,000,000 times faster. So imagine a machine of human intelligence studying a PhD. It would be 1,000,000 times faster. That's like a PhD in what, a couple of minutes. Right? so I mean, it almost sounds like a joke today. It sounds like science fiction, but it's coming. So if you take the issue seriously, if humanity decides to put these machines on the plate, so to speak, if we create them, then we have a major problem.
Okay, next one.
You're going to sleep. Can you?
My artificial brain lab and similar labs, in a sense, we are the problem, because what are we doing? We're creating artificial brains that will get smarter and smarter every year. And you can imagine, say 20 years from now, people will be spending a lot of money on their home robot. And then 2 or 3 years later, they'll buy another one. They'll upgrade their home robot, and they'll notice that their new one is smarter, it has richer vocabulary, it remembers better, it has better logic, and so on. And so they'll see for themselves, millions, if not billions of people, that the human intelligence level and their home robot, machine intelligence level, that difference over the years is getting smaller and smaller. And as that gap closes, millions of people will be asking questions like, well, are we going to let our machines become smarter than we are? Is that a good thing? Is that dangerous? So I imagine a great debate really starting to rage as that gap closes. But the scenario I see as the most probable, right? You can't be certain talking about the future, but the most probable scenario, in my view, with all my reasoning, is probably the worst. At stake this time, it's not the survival of a country. This time, it's the survival of us as a species. So I see humanity splitting. That's based on the word cosmos, because that's their godlike, massively intelligent machines. And for them, it'd be almost like a religion. They'd be God-building. I mean, these artilects, these super creatures, live forever. They'd be immortal. They'd be thinking like 1,000,000 times faster than we do. And no limit to memory. They could be the size of asteroids, whatever. And that's potentially very frightening. Now, the other group opposed is, the essence of the movies is machines versus humans. Right? Now, my personal take, I don't see that's what's going to happen. This Artolec war is not between the machines and humans. It's between humans and humans. Anticipating that if they don't do anything, then it really would be between machines and humans. So in a sense, you could say the Terminator movies are educating the Terrans. I mean, it sounds like science fiction today, but at least amongst the techies, the guys who think about this, it's getting taken more and more seriously, because we're getting closer and closer to it. I mean, we'll have intelligent home robots in our homes in a decade, pretty much. It's close. So if there's a major war, the most passionate war we've ever known, with late 21st century weaponry, then we're not talking millions getting killed, like last century, 20th century. it'll be in the billions killed. You can draw a graph, but that's a sizable fraction of the population of the Earth. So it's incredibly depressing. There are times when I feel I'm glad I'm alive now. I'll probably die peacefully in my bed. But I calculate my grandkids will be caught up in this, and I won't. And I say, thank God, I won't see it. Each person is going to have to choose. But because it's a binary decision, it's not fuzzy. You build them or you don't build them, right? It's black and white. So everyone has to choose. So I just chose Cosmist. Fully conscious that maybe, you can't be certain, but maybe the price of that choice is ultimately maybe humanity gets wiped out. Yeah, it's scary. It's frightening. Because if we go ahead and actually build these godlike creatures, these artilects, then they become the dominant species. And so the human beings remaining, their fate depends not on the humans, but on the artilects, because the artilects will be hugely more intelligent than them. I mean, if you're a cow, for example, and you have a very nice life, and you eat all this grass every day, and you get nice and fat and happy, but ultimately, you're being fed for a reason, right? So these superior creatures, at the end of the day, take you to a special little box, and
Can you hear me? Okay. How old am I? Yeah, I'm 20 years older than Ben. Ben's my best friend. He's my worst friend. He's my only friend. So they're all rolled into one. I've been living nearly 10 years in China. I see the 21st century being Chinese. Chinese are actually smarter than Americans and Europeans. On average, IQ about 105, like the Germans, also 105. Americans, most Europeans, about 100. So I see this as the 21st century as China's. So one of my messages in the talk will be that I would like to see the dominant issue of the 21st century be led, not just followed, but led by the dominant culture of the 21st century, which will be China. I see the banksters, New York, Frankfurt, London, Basel, as destroying the economies. As soon as are you all aware of what's going to happen when the dollar crashes? America's standard of living will fall to third world levels. Japan's going the same way, massively in debt. And Europe, the same thing. So virtually that will leave Russia and China standing. So I see China will just take over the world easily. Yes, yeah. Very recently. I hope they're not controlled by the same people who control the Western economies. Okay, so I'm a political animal, okay? So this talk will be politics, philosophy, and obviously tech. Right, so they'll give you a bit of a feel for what's coming. Right, so I believe the dominant question for this century will be this one, in 4 words, like, should humanity build artilects? That's my word. An artilect is just short for artificial intellect. That's the name I give to a godlike, massively intelligent machine. And by that, I don't mean a machine that's like 2 times or 10 times smarter than human beings. I'm a math and a physics guy. That's my background, mathematical physics. Right now, I've been retired 5 years. Now I make YouTube lecture videos at PhD level, pure math and math physics, to teach the world for free at that level, high level. and electronic libraries. So I go to Google and I get all these books, and Google the last year or so has been putting lots of links to full content books. How the paper publishers are surviving, I don't understand. It seems to me a contradiction. But there are now huge numbers, millions of links to full content books. So I'm getting them all and putting them into files and creating electronic libraries for the world, so students who are very smart, they're PhD level students in the top 1% of IQ, but they're peasants all over the world, but they can teach themselves. Right? So I'm trying to revolutionize education. That's what I do now. I call myself a globicator, global educator. Okay? So politics, philosophy, and tech. So this question I see is dominating our global politics this century. So if you make an analysis,
Gaga easy.
Technology, what was the question that dominated the 19th and 20th century? It was Karl Marx's question. Who should own capital? Right? When the Industrial Revolution came along, the steam engines and so forth, there was a revolution in manufacture. The cottage industries, you know, the home looms in your own cottage, they could not compete with the machines that they're just working 24/7 and at great speed. So the productivity of the machines just bankrupted the cottage industry. At the end of this speech,
A Heinkel HE-111 medium bomber darts in and out of the mists above the French coast. The pilot squints in a vain attempt to see through the foggy windshield and grits his teeth as anti-aircraft shells pierce the low-hanging clouds below. As the Heinkel settles into its attack run, shrapnel rattles the fuselage. Even with dozens of Royal Navy destroyers filling the air with flak, the civilian ships crowding Dunkirk harbor are an irresistible target for the pilot. The bomb bay doors open directly over the hapless French steamer, from which men spill out into the ocean waters even as certain death awaits them. As the ship is consumed by a seething inferno, the Heinkel disappears back into the fog bank. Before we delve into this topic, I'd like to thank today's sponsor, Rise of Kingdoms, a free historical RTS game with millions of players across the Ganzu to Turtles never could. The Maginot Line had been bypassed, and the impregnable Belgian fortress of Eben Emael had fallen to a handful of German paratroopers. Generals such as Heinz Guderian and Erwin
Hey guys, thanks for tuning in to another video on ForgottenWeapons.com. I'm Ian McCollum, and we are out today taking a look at the HK MP7. This is specifically an MP7A1, so it's had a couple little improvements from the original base model, but not quite all the really fancy desert-colored stuff of the A2 pattern. Now, there's some interesting backstory to this, and of course, this was designed as a quote-unquote PDW, a personal defense weapon. And the requirements for this sort of firearm originated in the very late 1980s when NATO discovered that the Russian military was starting to issue body armor as standard equipment. And at this point, of course, the Soviet Union was still fully intact, and NATO's major concern was, what if Russia attacks Western Europe? They're going to have Spetsnaz teams, you know, running around behind Allied lines, behind NATO lines. They're going to have paratroopers dropping into, you know, Western Germany and unleashing all sorts of havoc. And they're all going to be wearing body armor. And so all of these support-type troops behind the front lines are going to be running around with 9mm pistols that are going to be incapable of going through the body armor on all of these Soviet combatants. So NATO issued a requirement for a new personal defense weapon that could defeat this Soviet body armor. And there were two main firearms developed in response to it. One was the FNP-90, and the other was the HK MP7. Now, the MP7 has had a little bit of an uphill battle in the marketplace because it came out several years after the P90. And so the P90 garnered a lot of attention and interest and clients, and the MP7 kind of has to prove itself to a level that the P90 maybe didn't. There are also some very significant mechanical differences between the two. The P90 is a simple blowback action. It is selective fire, as is the MP7. But the MP7 is a short stroke gas piston rotating bolt. This is basically a little teeny miniaturized G36 action or AR-18 action, or kind of similar to the 416 action. You've got a gas port right up here. You have what looks like a miniaturized AR bolt. And that allows a couple things. Well, mainly that allows the weight on the MP7 to be reduced because it doesn't, the P90 is dependent on just the weight of the bolt to stay locked. The MP7 isn't, so it can be lighter. This is very similar to the MP5 being a delayed action compared to the standard blowback of most other submachine guns. Now, in its original guise, the idea was this PDW, be it the MP7 or the P90 or any other firearm, just the way NATO conceived this, these would be issued to basically everyone who wasn't a frontline soldier issued a rifle or a carbine. So instead of getting a 9mm pistol, you'd get an MP7 if you were a cook or a clerk or a driver or anybody else like that. In this role, it's kind of similar to the M1 carbine during World War II, issued to replace the .45 caliber pistol because it was a lot easier to shoot accurately, but largely issued to guys who weren't really expected to need them much at all, if ever. However, in the intervening years between when NATO issued these requirements and when the MP7 actually came on the market, fully developed, this took about 10 years. The MP7 was delivered for production first, I believe, around 2001. Well, the problem is, between then and between those 2 years, the Soviet Union fell apart. There's not really that much concern today about Soviet paratroopers, dropping into Western Germany and columns of tanks coming through the Fulda Gap. So the need to actually issue these out has pretty much gone away. Much of the combat today that forces are actually seeing, and this isn't like full-size armies, but much of the combat is against, say, insurgents in the Middle East, people who aren't typically wearing body armor. And so a small caliber cartridge like this fires the 4.6 by 33mm cartridge, which is kind of equivalent to like 17 HMR rimfire. It's a 31 or 32 grain bullet traveling at about 2,350 feet per second. It's great for penetration, but it's not as good at actual lethality as something a lot bigger. And so shortly after these guns came out, you would see also a resurgence in, say, 45 caliber submachine guns, focused on what was really kind of the more direct, immediate threat at the time. Anyway, before I digress too far, this has ended up becoming an issued weapon largely for specialist troops, for special forces guys who need something better than or more capable than just a handgun, but smaller and more mobile and compact than a full-size rifle. There were apparently, a bunch of these were used in the U.S. Navy SEAL raid that killed Osama bin Laden. And that's the sort of application that you see these in today. So where it was initially intended to be a massive scale, a standard infantry weapon for the guys who don't have rifles, it ended up being a sneaky squirrel and specialist troops sort of gun, simply because of needs. All right, let's try doing some shooting. I'm going to go ahead and extend the stock out because this is really much better as a carbine than as a very large pseudo handgun. These were issued with 20-round magazines, or made with 20 rounders, which are flush with the grip, 30s and 40s. This is a 40-rounder. We have a bolt release here, safety lever here. It is selective fire, so semi-auto and then full auto. And let's see how this goes. I'll be honest, the recoil on this is a little more jarring than I had expected. If you go into this expecting kind of like a vaguely oversized rimfire cartridge, 17 HMR, you'd expect it to have basically no recoil, and it actually does. It's not a hard kick, but it's a very abrupt and sharp kick for what it is. Let's try a little bit in full auto. Yeah, kind of the same thing. It bounces around a little bit more than I had expected. I suspect with more practice, which I certainly haven't had, this is my first time out at the range with one of these guys, with a little more practice, it's going to be very easy to control. But right at first, kicks a little more than I had expected. Magazine release is the lever on the bottom of the trigger guard. Push it down to eject.
So a lot of times it's small groups come out with 6 or sometimes 20 people.
Now, one of the uses that was not maybe originally intended for this gun is shooting it suppressed. You know, if you're issuing it to everybody, not so much. But when you issue this to special forces guys who are going to go do secret, sneaky stuff with it, putting a suppressor on it makes a lot of sense, especially because it is this little tiny cartridge. It's quite easy to suppress. In fact, with a can this size, it's completely hearing safe. So I can pull those guys out, and let's see what we can do here. You're still going to get a supersonic crack from it, of course, because this is supersonic ammunition, but that really makes it very convenient and easy to use. All right, guys, well, hopefully you enjoyed this little bit of an intro to the MP7. There's a lot more to talk about on something like this. Of course, this is a gun that is still in very active use, still actively being improved and refined. So a big thank you to HK for letting me come out here and play with their MP7A1. Also, thank you to Trijicon for giving us access to their range and slapping a cool MRO optic on this thing for us. And, of course, what you've probably been waiting for is a magazine dump. So, 30 rounds in there. Thanks for watching. Hi guys, thanks for tuning in to another video on ForgottenWeapons.com. I'm Ian McCollum, and I am out here at the range today. Trijicon's range, by the way. Thanks to Trijicon for letting us, generously letting us use their range. And we're out here today with an MP5. And this is a pretty basic MP5A3 collapsing stock, nice, modern submachine gun from the 50s, because I've had very little actual trigger time with an MP5, and the more I hear about them, the more I want to try these out, because especially, in fact, after listening to Ken Hackathorn talk about these, we have an interview with Ken about the MP5 and other submachine guns. He really extolled the virtues of the MP5, as does pretty much everybody else who ever shoots them. And so I really wanted to get my hands on one and see, is this really as nice as everybody says? Now, on the abstract, on paper, it should be. It's a light gun, it's a compact gun, and perhaps most importantly of all, it is a, not quite locked breech, it's a delayed blowback, closed bolt submachine gun. So what that means is you actually have a really nice trigger in these guns compared to a typical open bolt gun. And the bolt's already closed when you fire it. So on most open bolt, all open bolt submachine guns, when you pull the trigger, the first thing that happens is this rather heavy bolt goes slamming forward to pick up a cartridge and chamber it. And that has the effect of throwing your aim off. In fact, if you watch people on video, if someone pulls the trigger on an open bolt gun where the magazine's empty, but they don't know it's empty, they will often jerk the gun forward. And it looks like they're flinching, but that's just the kinetic energy of the bolt hitting the front of the bolt face, not firing, and going ka-chunk down. And that same thing happens when you actually fire. So it takes a lot more skill to be able to properly and effectively shoot an open bolt gun. Well, the MP5 bypasses all of that because it's closed bolt. So anyway, enough yabbering. Let's see how this works. Now, I'm going to start with some shooting on semi-auto, because even in a military law enforcement sort of circumstance, a gun like this is typically used as a semi-automatic carbine. It is by far the most practically accurate to shoot in semi-auto. You get a nice sight picture with each shot. That's full auto is only used for emergencies. So let's give this thing a try on the dueling tree. That's just like too easy. That's like cheating. All right, so semi's cool, but what you guys really came here to see is full auto. So let's give that a try and see how it is. That's really sweet. It doesn't have the weight of a typical submachine gun because the closed bolt delayed blowback action means you don't need a really heavy bolt like you do in an open bolt gun. It's compact, it's ergonomic, it's well, almost completely ambidextrous if you discount the charging handle there. This thing is really sweet. I need another magazine. All right, you know what? I bet I can even hit these things on full auto. Let's see if I can do this with little 2-round bursts, some trigger control, some single shots on full auto. Well, now I'm out of ammo, but yeah. All right, so I'm far from the expert on this sort of thing. There's many, many people out there who've been in the real, been there, done that, and extol the virtues of the MP5. But I'll tell you what, from my experience now, granted, brief experience, this thing totally lives up to the hype. This is a fantastic little submachine gun, and it's really obvious why, despite HK's attempts to keep modernizing this thing for decades now, none of them quite take. Everybody just wants to keep using MP5s, because man, they just work, and they are nice to shoot. So, a big thank you to HK for letting me come out here and put a whole bunch of ammo through one of their MP5s. And thank you to Trijicon as well for giving us access to their range. And I know that what all of you guys have been waiting for is a full mag dump. So, I don't know how many of those hit, but it was sure fun. Thanks for watching.
Hi guys, thanks for tuning in to another video on ForgottenWeapons.com. It is time for another Q&A. And I wanted to start actually by pointing out that after many years of people requesting and then several months of working to get it arranged, we finally have shirts. So if you take a look at the link below, that will take you to the shop where you can get not just shirts, but hoodies, backpacks, a couple other cool things, both for Forgotten Weapons and also for InRange TV, if you're interested in those. This particular one is kind of a Puckle Gun limited edition shirt. It's still there in the shop as of when I'm recording this, but it will be disappearing at some point. I don't know exactly when. There are a number, the stuff with just the standard basic logos will be always available, but some of the really cool stuff like this will come and go, be limited edition stuff. So if you are one of those people who has been really excited and asking me to get some of that available, it now is. So check the link in the description below. All right, we will start with BR Waldo, who asks, do you have a Forgotten Weapons reading list that you would be willing to share with us? Well, sort of. Kind of yes, kind of not really. I get a lot of questions about, what book should I get about guns? And the answer is, I don't really know. There are one or two really good general purpose books that I often recommend. Handguns of the World by Edward Ezell is one in particular. It's cheap. It covers a remarkable amount of technical detail while also being an interesting historical, putting things in historical context. And best of all, that book is available really, really cheap most of the time. So I usually recommend that. But beyond that, it becomes a question of, well, what are you interested in? And the books that I have are almost all on pretty specific subjects. So if you want to know, what book should I get on the M1 Garand? Okay, we can give you some answers for that. Or is there a good reference book on Argentinian Mausers? Yes, there is. Or Argentine Mausers, sorry. Yeah, there is. And I can tell you about that book. But if it's just, well, I'm interested in guns, then it's really hard to say. Now, one thing that I do have going, I'm going to be doing, I have been doing, and I will continue to do more book reviews. We did a lot of those early on, and people enjoy them. And it seems like there are a lot of new books coming out that are interesting and valuable. I think the internet is helping in large part with a lot of that. But there will be a more regular book review series going. And also on the website, ForgottenWeapons.com, because there is a website behind this whole thing, not just a YouTube channel. At the very bottom of the page, one of the things that I'm keeping at the bottom is a note of what am I currently reading. And that's usually going to be something that's not strictly technical. At the moment I'm recording this, it's actually a book on General de Gaulle in France, a political history of de Gaulle. So if you're interested in what am I reading for general educational content, take a look at the very bottom of ForgottenWeapons.com. And when I finish one book and switch to another, I'll go ahead and change the link in the image down there. D. Griggs says, I recently bought a 1916 SMLE in great condition. Is it normal for the rifles to have such a bad trigger? Well, yeah, pretty much is. I found with a lot of military surplus stuff, especially things as old as World War II, World War I, there's really a lot of variability. You'll get sometimes pretty decent triggers. You'll get sometimes pretty terrible triggers. That depends a lot on the manufacturer, how the gun has worn, whether or not anyone has done any work, pro or con, to that gun in the decade since it was in the military. It is possible to replace parts and get a better trigger pull. It's possible to replace parts and get a worse trigger pull. If you just had something that broke at some point and someone just swapped in a new part, then of course, if that happens after a gun's been surplus, the military has no control over, a quality assessment on the trigger pull. A lot of these guns were not made to have really, really nice triggers like a lot of us are used to today. So, in short, Yeah, even guns that are renowned for being quite accurate, things like Finnish Mosin Nagants, you'll still get a fair number of them with pretty awful trigger pulls, and I think that was just kind of par for the course most of the time. Next up, Alan asks, can you suggest any underappreciated or undervalued firearms for a beginning collector? Well, so the tricky part here is if you want something that you can have underpriced and you can have underappreciated, but sometimes it's difficult to get both. Underpriced will often happen when a gun is being imported. So we saw this a couple of years ago with a bunch of the little like Polish 32 caliber pistols that came in and Czech 32 caliber pistols. A whole bunch of these things come in a giant batch from one of the big importers, someone like Century, and they're sold at retail, both by Century and by all of its distributors. And so that kind of pushes the price down because this is something that's simply available and there's lots of them. And as a result, you get these pistols for about $200. And then what happens is as those dry up, this was one big import batch that came in and they sell out. And as they get scarcer and scarcer on the retail market, the price starts to go up a little bit. Once they're completely sold out, then it kind of becomes a supply and demand thing. There are a lot of people who, and I include myself in this group, I ought to know better, but I often don't. A lot of people who ignore the guns when they come in a big batch because it's like, oh, well, they're cheap. They can't be all that good. They'll always be there. I don't really want to spend $200 on that right now, but maybe next month. And then 6 months later, you come back to it and you're like, oh, what about those little 32s? And go and look, and now they're gone. And now they're, selling on Gunbroker and auction pages and classified ad pages for like $300, and things just kind of climb from there. So at that point, you're looking at a gun that it was underpriced, and then it goes to being underappreciated maybe, but now the prices are going up because they're less available. The trick, I think, to finding something that's both cheap and cool is to look for stuff that was imported in a big batch, but was imported long enough ago that people don't really remember it anymore and aren't that interested in it. So a classic example would probably be, sorry Italy, Italian surplus firearms, Carcanos or Carcanos. There are a bunch of different variations, and I think they're kind of interesting. I'm going to be doing a 2-gun match with an M38 Carcano, hopefully coming up shortly in the future. We'll have to see exactly when we can schedule that one in. But I think they're better guns than people give them credit for. Now, there are going to be issues with a lot of things. If you're getting it, if it's cheap and cool, there's probably something else that's keeping it from being really well appreciated or keeping the price down. And with Carcanos, that's usually ammunition. The 7.35 is very difficult to get. The 6.5 is easier now than it used to be. But a lot of these Carcanos were imported in the 50s and 60s and maybe 70s and 80s. And they got this really horrible reputation in part because of the ammunition, in part because just general World War I and World War II folklore, the Italians don't have that good of a reputation. But I think they're interesting guns. I have a handful of them myself, and I think that might be an interesting place to start if you're just looking for something that is collectible and also affordable and interesting. Japanese guns used to fall into that category as well. In fact, well, actually Japanese and French as well, although they've both been kind of making a comeback. People, largely I expect thanks to the internet, people are starting to appreciate both the Japanese and the French arms more and more. Arashi asks, was the myriad of early semi-automatic pistol designs a result of true experimentation and refinement, or mostly the need to avoid existing patents? I think really the answer is both. You had elements of each. There were some designers, like John Browning, who came up with some pretty good ideas and patented everything they could come up with. In 1897, Browning patented not 1, not 2, but 4 different ways to operate a semi-automatic pistol. And, for example, one of those was basically a gas, not a gas trap, but like a gas hammer designed for a pistol, similar to the Colt 1895 machine gun, which turns out to have been a terrible way to operate a pistol. And I don't believe they might have done a prototype, but never went past prototype status. No one really had to worry about avoiding that patent. That was just, maybe that'll work. There's an idea. Just in case, I'll patent it so that I have a monopoly on that idea of mine if I decide that it is something that I want to follow that does work well. At the same time, because of things like that, you'll get patents taken out on ideas that are really terrible ideas. And of course, no one was hurting to try and get around that particular patent of Browning's. So early on, people really didn't know what was going to work and what wasn't. And it's more than just the operating system. You have a lot of other elements in there, like do we need extractors? You know, the early Bergmann pistols didn't have extractor rims on the ammunition or extractors in the bolt face because, well, maybe we don't actually need that. The gun seems to work without it. A lot of little elements like that, which are also patentable things. There are a lot of features beyond just the gross operating mechanism that got patented. And especially in that area, you get, you know, throw it all at the wall and see what sticks. I want to take a minute here to also mention an email I got from a viewer named John, who appears to have watched a few too many Forgotten Weapons videos and decided to quit his job and start up a shooting educational historical experience sort of thing called Belt and Holster, out of Jackson, Wyoming. And the idea being basically a kind of the impression I get is kind of like the machine gun rental places that you see popping up in various places, except focused instead on the historical Old West experience and allowing people who may not own the guns or have ever fired any guns, or maybe people who are into tactical black rifles, to get an actual hands-on experience for shooting Old West cowboy era guns, lever guns, shotguns, revolvers, the works. And it's something that he is trying to start on his own entrepreneurially, which I think is a fantastic job, fantastic idea. I'd like to promote that sort of thing amongst anyone who has the wherewithal to try and make it happen. And he's doing a lot of his funding by running a t-shirt campaign, not promising anything other than a cool t-shirt and or belt. And so he sent me one of these shirts, and I think it's cool. If you guys are interested, if you like the design of the shirt, check it out. It would help fund a cool endeavor that I think has the potential to really be a beneficial thing for firearms history, firearms culture, and helping to bring new people in to understand and experience what it is that we think is so cool about guns. So thanks to John. Good luck to you. I really hope it succeeds, and I hope some of the other folks watching end up being your customers in the future. Now, on to our next question. Bob G says, considering that all prior attempts at direct gas impingement systems failed rather spectacularly, why did Stoner adopt that system and why did the US military accept it? Well, I think there's a false premise in the question. Previous attempts at direct gas impingement actually were fairly successful. There are really only kind of two main ones. The Swedish Ljungman, which was a reasonably successful gun and developed in a remarkably short period of time. Of course, Sweden didn't really get into a significant major conflict, military conflict with those rifles the way a lot of other countries did, say World War II. So there wasn't a lot of military combat field use of the Ljungman, although it was a good enough design that it did get exported out to Egypt. They decided to manufacture them under license as in both 7.62x39 as the Rashid and an 8 Mauser as the Hakim rifle. But the Ljungman was a good gun, and it is straight direct gas blowback or direct gas impingement. The other one, of course, is the whole French series. The French started with the Moss 1940 and then the 1944, which was actually put into production, quickly revised as the Moss 49, which worked pretty well, and they decided, well, we can lighten this, make it a little handier, turned into the 49/56. All of those are also pure direct gas impingement, and they work extremely well. So I would call direct gas impingement a system that is not hugely common, but certainly not one that you could ever reasonably call disastrous or unsuccessful. Now, in the AR-15, in the Stoner system, you actually don't have direct gas impingement. What you have is a gas piston that is built into the bolt and bolt carrier, where that intersection where the bolt fits into the bolt carrier, that is the gas piston. What people refer to as the direct gas impingement part is simply a very long gas tube taking gas from out here on the barrel, routing it down into the bolt carrier where it operates the piston. Now, it is somewhat interesting, thinking about it now, that nobody else has really tried to replicate that system, where you have the gas piston built into the bolt carrier assembly. Patents are all long expired. There's no reason anyone couldn't take on that design, but I think probably the most reasonable explanation for why they haven't is that the AR-15 really does that system quite well. And if you want to use that system, I'm not sure there's much reason to redesign the wheel instead of just work from the AR to begin with. Well-proven examples of the AR-15 exist in both small intermediate calibers, 5.56, and large full-power rifle calibers, like 308. So what's the advantage in starting from scratch? Daniel K. says, the Silencer Co. Osprey and Salvo 12 are offset. Those are both suppressors from Silencer Co. And when he says offset, he means that the bore of the gun is not located in the direct center of the suppressor. I'd like to hear from Ian as well, given why... So that's not really a question, but it is a statement of unusual fact. I'd like to hear from Ian as well, given how they seem to be the only ones making cans that way. Maybe it's easier to manufacture a simple tube and circular baffles. That is true. I'm sure it is a little bit less expensive to make just a plain concentric suppressor. The other reason, I think, is that the suppressor market is a pretty tight one. There's not that much that you can judge a suppressor by. Basically, you've got weight, size, and decibel reduction. And both because of the NFA and because decibel reduction is something that's in some ways really kind of hard to get a good feel for. You know, if I say 134 decibels, to most people who aren't deeply into suppressors, that doesn't really mean a whole lot. And even the people who are deeply into suppressors are going to hear a number like that, and then they're going to immediately say, give us context. Is that at the muzzle? Is it several feet back from the muzzle? Is it several feet out from the ejection port? Or is it on the non-ejection port side of the gun? Is it ahead or behind of the muzzle? There are a lot of details here that will...
Remember, he came out kind of awkwardly against Rampage.
Yeah, he came out very low, almost crawling at him. And he's going to do that again.
Yeah, just for a second.
As long as he has one hand on the ground, Lyoto can't kick him. Can't kick him in the face.
And now he's up. Black trunks for the champion. Red trunks for the challenger. Very few men dart in and out any better than Lyoto Machida.
Yeah, stylistically, he's a very interesting puzzle for the style that John Jones possesses and the physical attributes that John possesses. One of the things about John is how thin his legs are. If you look at his calves, they're almost...
with it. Here we Правый коронный, правый покоронный.
Служивый! One on. Вали! Вон он, сука! Вон он, блядь, ебашь его! Да вот!
Comically thin, and no one has ever seen anyone kick those legs, especially consistently.
Spinning back kick. Lyoto's counter-striking as good as any in mixed martial arts.
Yeah, and Lyoto kicks very fast. There's no wind-up to his kicks. Because he has this karate style, it's very different than Muay Thai in the fact that he doesn't step before he throws his kicks. He throws them right from his stance.
And John will change his stance frequently during a fight.
Yeah, John doesn't just fight southpaw, he fights orthodox. He does everything crazy. It's so, wow, what a powerful leg kick that was.
And he really showcased his kicks in the title defense against Rampage and gave a lot of credit to Mike Winklejohn for the improvement in his Muay Thai.
Well, Mike Winklejohn is an outstanding coach, but what a student this guy is. I mean, he just, from the first fight we saw him against Guzman, he's just improved so drastically. This is the tip of the wave. I mean, these guys are coming right now. These super athletes, these people that, you know, could have competed in any sport if they so choose to put their focus on it.
Well, his brother's in the National Football League.
Another
Nice
powerful leg kick.
But the counter by Lyoto.
And look at that hand stretching out the distance. That's something that John can do that no one else can do.
Lyoto just missed with that right hook counter, though.
Just missed and missed by a mile are just as good.
Yeah, good point, right? Again with the spin. The Karate Kid pushes forward.
And that's something that Lyoto does. It's very scary. That rush, that crazy karate blitz.
I believe John is doing the same exact thing as Lyoto right now, where usually it's just Jones's opponent trying to figure out how to deal with the unorthodox striking. Jones is trying to do the exact same thing.
And he's going to worry about getting caught in a blitz.
As he should.
Yes. He can't get complacent. He can't get sedentary.
Nice kick to the body. The body kick, then the left, is something that Cheetah utilizes.
Clearly the hardest John's ever been hit. Right there. The hardest and the cleanest. And Lyoto employs one of John's techniques, the front leg side kick to the thigh.
Yep. I have heard it said over and over again, especially by you, my longtime partner, styles make fights. And this is stylistically one of the most intriguing matchups in MMA history. And don't forget Jones's great Greco-Roman wrestling and Lyoto Machida's Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu black belt skills. Oh! Pushing forward again is Machida. Clipped him.
There's certain iconic shapes.
Yes.
And there's something about those cars, too. They're not as capable.
Time to welcome a guest.
Who we got today, Poppy?
UFC fighter Chael Sonnen.
This guy's a lunatic. He's a crazy person. He's controversial. He's colorful. He's fun. He wants to fight Anderson Silva for his belt, but first he has to get by Michael Bisping Saturday, UFC, Fox 2. Let's talk to this crazy person. When was the last time you were scared before combat?
When I jump out of that airplane, I don't want to be positive that chute's going to open.
You don't? You don't?
I don't.
What do you mean you don't?
Well, if you can't understand it, you can't sit in my shoes, brother. A lot of guys can be fighters, but only one can be champion. And maybe I'm wired a little bit differently, but that's the way it goes.
Well, correct me if I'm wrong, but isn't Silva the champ?
Yeah, I will correct you. You are wrong.
But that's not your belt.
Well, whose do you propose it is?
I don't know. I don't know. Where'd you get it? Where'd you get it?
What do you think? I just woke up and went and took it from him?
I don't know.
Of course it's a belt.
Finders, keepers, losers, weepers, and if he wants it back, he knows where to find me.
Yeah, I think you can get them on eBay for about $29.99.
That's what I was just checking.
Says it right on there.
What happened in that press conference?
We got asked questions by the media, and then we responded to them with our voices.
You were shoving each other. You held your ground. What happened?
Well, it sounds like you know. It sounds like you just told us.
How many more fights do you think you can lose and still be such a big draw?
Oh, Dan, come on. You're asking me. Why would have I ever thought of things like that? I don't have any idea. How long are you going to hold a pen in your hand and not write anything down? I mean, what are we going to do, go back and forth and ask each other stupid things? Look, he's the one that contacted me and goes, whoa, 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 you've misunderstood. I never challenged you to a fight, Chael. I just told you I want the fight that you have. I asked you to step aside. So talk to Vitor about that.
He called you to clarify? Is that what you just said?
Yeah, he contacted me to clarify, yes.
And what did he say?
Levitard, are you listening? I just told you what he said. He said, I did not call you out. I said, I want you to move aside. I want the fight that you have.
He did say you don't deserve the fight.
All right.
What do you say to the critic who says, well, Sonnen's just a big mouth who was in that fight the first time with Silva because his testosterone levels were 4 times higher than they should have been?
I would say, hello.
That's it. That's all you're giving me.
Man, I'm from the mean streets of Westland, Oregon. You got to look over your back. You don't know what it's like out there. I'll tell you about it someday, but it's rough.
I just imagine it being a lot of ducks.
A lot of ducks? Oh, I'm sorry. Is this where I was that your attempted humor? I'm sorry. I would have played a lot. I didn't know that. Was that ha.
Are you going to tell me what it is that you grew up around or not?
No.
What is your greatest advantage over John Jones?
Oh, reach.
There's nobody who would disagree with that Silva and Jones are better than you are.
Oh, that Silva and Jones are, well, there's one way to find out.
Well, we found out with Silva, right? That's done? We found out there?
Is there a question in here somewhere, Dan?
You understand how it is that some of that would be taken as race baiting, do you not? No?
Dan, I've got a degree in sociology from the University of Oregon. Apparently you do not, because you're greatly mistaking race with ethnicity with nationality. If you said that I said it about Brazil, which is not a race, it's a nation, then you might want to run the tape back and not air this because you're going to look foolish in the presence of a genius.
What do you think of Steven Seagal being in Anderson Silva's camp?
You know, and so good for him. I don't know what it is. I don't really care. He wrote those guys a check, and, you know, they've got an obligation to say certain things about him in the media. So, you know, good for Steven. Maybe it gets him extra work. I don't know.
I don't know that that's entirely true. You're saying that Steven Seagal is paying to be a part of that posse?
What is this? Like, I say something, then you repeat it to make sure you heard. This whole thing's being videotaped. If you need to go back and rewatch it on your own time, do it. But for now, for the sake of the viewers, they get the world's smartest man for roughly 100 more seconds. Give them some new topics.
But I don't think what you're saying is true, Chael.
96 seconds and counting.
What are you trying to accomplish when you say that you're going to slap Silva's manager and that you're going to slap Silva's wife on the ass if she doesn't make you a steak medium rare just the way you like it?
You know, you're the second person to ask me that, and I never said it. You'll never find that quote anywhere. You'll never replay it. It simply didn't happen. I will slap his manager as quick as I will.
I am not here to satisfy you. I am not here so you like, oh, Grant, I like him. I don't care if you like me or not, man. I want to move a handful of people in the room to go from $400 grand a year to start thinking about how do I make $4 million?
My goal is to meet as many people on this planet as possible, people that are positive, people that have more time to create than to be critical, more time to hustle than they have to hate, and they want to actually add strategy and techniques that are proven to grow their business so that they can take care of their family and their church.
Thank you, Bob. Hey, thank you very much for having me. I live here in Miami. Anybody here live here? No? You guys are all out of well, welcome. So what I want to talk to you about today is having the life. And the economy collapsed. When Lehman collapsed, the life that I thought I had was put at risk. So you're in this room because you're a top producer. And I'm going to tell you that one of the things that to me is the most difficult thing in my entire career is becoming a top producer. Because the moment you become a top producer, you become susceptible to thinking you have the life. I grew up in a little town in Louisiana, a little small town, about 60,000 people. You probably hear the accent. And I grew up in a middle class family. My dad died when I was 10 years old. My mother raised us. And my mother constantly told me how proud I should be of myself. How many of you got a mother like that? You should be so proud of yourself, okay? Every time, my mom was my best friend, and every time I would have a success, it didn't matter whether I was 18 years old or 48 years old. Anytime I had a success, she was the first person I called. I wouldn't call my girlfriend, wouldn't call my wife, wouldn't call any of the people that were closest to me. I'd call my mom up and say, Mom, you'd never believe I just bought a real estate deal. I started this company. I bought my first real estate deal. It's 38 units. It's $4 million. And she'd be like, that's awesome. I love you just the way you are. And I'm like, okay, thanks. She told me that 1,000 times. How many of you had a parent tell you, I love you? That's great. You made 160 grand last year. But I love you just the way you are. How many hear that? Okay, that's right out of the 10X rule. I don't know if you know that. That's right out of the 4 actions. Anybody know what action is? Average. I'm doing well. Okay? There's 4 levels of action. Number 1 is I do nothing. If I rewrote this book, I would take that out. That's actually impossible. To do nothing at all is impossible. Try doing it right now. To do nothing means you had to make a decision to do something and not do it. This is actually not true. I wouldn't put it in the book if I rewrote it. The second level of action is to retreat. This is what most people do, by the way. How many had a commitment to work out today and didn't? Okay, yeah, I was up late. Whatever. You came up with whatever reason, I'm going to make the call. By the way, any retreat in life, any single retreat is a discipline and a commitment to retreat when it matters. So every time you make a decision, you just need to be aware that what are you doing here, okay? There's only 4 things you can do in any given day, right? You could do nothing, you could retreat, or you could do this, average. Now, I know you guys are being told that you're the top, you're the best, you made it to Miami, but I'm just gonna tell you right now, ain't not a person in this room is above number 3. No, I'm not there, okay? And I know how much I'm grinding every day, how much I'm pushing every day, how many hours I put into a day. What's the maximum number of hours you can do in a day? Not if you add people. If you added people, you got to think beyond the 24th thing. Once you guys get committed, then you will come up with solutions outside the physical universe. Okay, you're already doing that. Your space is bizarre. Okay, here there's a bunch of people in the room that like I don't know anything about technology. I'm 61 years old. I was born in 1958. I am supposed to be outside of that moment of technology. Yet I'm probably one of the top 5 social media people in the world today. Banging on Instagram and Snapchat and LinkedIn and Google Plus that'll go away. Using all these mechanisms to try to get attention so that I can operate at this level, 10X thing, this massive level that is always changing, by the way. You can't 10X something. People are like, man, I'd write the book. If I wrote the book, I'd write it 11X. I'm like, that's because you don't understand 10X, dude. 10X is a multiplier. It's 10X, which is 100. Okay? So what I did when Lehman collapsed, I wrote the 10X. And I wrote the book because I realized I had done something wrong. That book was written for me. And the reason, when I closed the book, the reason I was like, whatever, I had figured out what I had done wrong, okay? I had to embrace the idea that $3 or $4 million in a bank and a house paid for and 2 cars and a marriage, and I got it better than everybody else. And my mama loved me just the way I am, was all this middle class.
Да ты чё там пиздишь?
America, particularly here in America, how many of you live in America? Okay, in America, the middle class, it is the sleeping chamber on planet Earth. Okay, people come here, they come from India and China, come to here to get a middle class. I don't want anything to do with this. Okay? You're middle class, you will not change the world. You might change your house. You might change the education your little kids get. Okay, they get to go to Texas A&M, big deal. Right? He told me that he went to Texas. I said, oh, that had to be screwed up. That was going to college. Why? Because what do they manufacture in college? They manufacture average people in college. So I want to challenge you today, okay? I want to challenge you today. I want to challenge you today to start thinking, hey, wait a minute, am I even a top producer? How did that get created for this room? What number did you have to hit to get in this room? What's the number, million? Who made that number? Was that Bob? I'm Bob. Bob's sitting here. What can we do? What can we do? Did he make the number 1 million up? Why wasn't it 1,100,000, 110, 111? Instead, because you got lazy. 1 million is a lazy number. How many would agree with that? It's a lazy number. Anything that ends in a zero is lazy. Come on, how about some creativity? Right? How about a little creativity when you're making decisions? Like, what's a good income level for this room? Let's say we don't share this anywhere inside this room. What would be a real number? You guys are going to hire me. What's a real number that I can make in this room? Y'all can talk to me. Again, I will not hurt you, okay? What's a number? 400. Okay, now why did we come up with that? I don't know how you guys can live on that. If I made 400 grand a year, I would be embarrassed with myself as a husband, a father, basically as a man. 400 grand. How do you make sense of $35,000 a year? You guys haven't done the math. You have not done the math because you cannot live on 400 grand a year. And if you think you can live on 400 grand a year, I might have to go back and add number one. Nothing. Anybody can live 400 grand a year. All you got to do is show. Okay, now I don't know if I'm right or wrong. You guys don't need to agree with me. I've already been paid my fee. Okay? I am not here to satisfy you. I am not here to be like, oh, 2.7. How does anybody live on $2.7 million a year? You need to make it impossible, dude. I can't, my plane eats $2.7 million a year. This dude needs to think different. He's running out of time, man. You guys all in the room, man, you're running out of time. You're in a space that is so frothy with opportunity, it's unbelievable. You're making sense of less than you can get. This is my mama. My mama saying, I love you, boy, just the way you are. Mama, I made $10 million on one deal. That's great. But son, I love you just the way you are. I'm like, shit, I don't love me just the way I am. Because I'm doing deals where I know I could make 100. Okay, how many of you in the room are operating below your potential? Let me see a hand. If you know you're operating below your potential, man, please tell me you're operating. How many of you, let me see a hand again, if you're operating below your potential? Okay, your finances should indicate that. Your finances are a way to tell the truth about who you are, your space. Like if you're an Uber driver and you're making $2.7 million a year, pat on the back. You're in this space making $2.7 million a year? Come on, man. Your company's doing what, $2 billion? $2 billion, and you guys aren't getting it all. Would you say that you're not getting it all? We got a lot of room. A lot of room. He's telling me he's in the first innings of his game. So I'm like, hey, what do I need to do? Let's say 400 is the number. Then I'm going to take this, and I'm just going to 10x that, and I'm going to build a business plan for $4 million. And I'm going to quit thinking that I got to do a 4-minute mile. I'm going to quit thinking about the physical universe. What can I do to produce $4 million worth of income? Is it here? Is it outside of here? Is it here and outside of here? How many customers would I need? This is what my goal for you today is, to leave here and say, dude, I ain't satisfied. Okay? I want to raise the numbers on this room. So the next time there's 75 people here and everybody adds a 0 to your income. Oh, by the way, if you love yourself at 400 grand, mama, if you love your son just the way he is at 400, would you love me a little more if I add a 0? No, she couldn't love me anymore. It wasn't up to her to love me. It was up to me to love what I'm doing every day, right? You guys are showing up, you're working your ass off every day, right or wrong? How many of you are making calls every day? You're like, I do not want to make this call, and you make it anyway. Good, then get paid for it. Get paid some real money for it, man. Okay? Get paid some real money, just add a 0. How many calls would I have to make? Is this even possible? He's doing part of it. He told me he's not tapped into all of it. He's hitting 70% of that number. If everybody walked out of here and said, hey, I'm going to build a $4 million plan. I'm going to tell you a little game I play. I got 14 little companies. I run 14 little companies while I'm doing deals, while I'm speaking to you today, right? I'm still running them in my head right now. I got them all open. I got browsers open all over the place. Counselor said, you got ADD. I said, I ain't got ADD. I don't know how to add. I multiply. I'm done adding. I'm done adding a customer. I want to multiply customers. I don't want to add orders. I want to multiply my orders, okay? I consider myself a decent salesperson. But it doesn't matter if you're a great salesperson. If you don't add business to the sale, if you don't become a business person, you can't build out zeros. Because you're going to hit a place where they can't pay you anymore, right or wrong. You got to start thinking about being a business inside the business. How do I add zeros? How do I grow the top line of my business, okay? So today I'm thinking, man, I'm gonna build a $10 billion business. I just go into it backwards. I'm gonna build a $10 billion business. I'm gonna take the 14 little things that I have, probably get down to 3 or 4 of them. How do I build 10 billion? I know the money's on the planet. Say yay if you agree there's $10 billion on planet Earth. Dude, you could suck $10 billion off planet Earth today and they wouldn't even give you, you wouldn't even make the paper. I just got to think different, and I can't compare it to my upbringing. How many people from China here? See a hand if you're... Dude, you compare what the average person makes there, you will make sense of anything. Would you agree? If I'm coming from India, I could make sense of 50 grand a year. 50 grand a year, dude, I'm doing great compared to what? Other people in India, right? My mom, she would give me food. When she'd feed me, she was programming me. How many of you are programmed by your parents? Eat it all. How many got this message when you got food and eat it all? I'm like, I'm full. Eat it all. There's people starving on this planet. I'm not one of them. I'm full. Eat it. Okay? And if you didn't eat it, you had to put it in the refrigerator. Right or wrong? How many of you got food in your refrigerator right now? You're in Miami and back home, you're still saving last Tuesday's meal. Because you think small. Okay? Open up your freezer when you go home. I'll tell you if you're middle class. Open up your freezer. There's some ice cream in your freezer, some Ben & Jerry's. They got this much left in it. They got more frost than they got ice cream. And you're saving it, man. You're saving it. You got all these little Ziploc containers. You're saving stuff. Why? You're saving stuff because you're worried about not creating stuff. Right? I just want to create a bigger top line. So what I do right here is this, okay? Anytime I'm short on creativity, I know that I need to look at creativity is the solution to that $10 billion. Would you agree? If I'm short on creativity, if the $10 billion exists, if $4 million of income exists, okay? If you guys think, hey, I could do 400 grand, or I could do $1 million, or I could do 4 million. If that money exists, if that's a reality, then what I need to look at is not the creativity, I need to look at the commitment, because creativity follows commitment. Where you lack creativity, handling an objection, following somebody up, grabbing business from somebody else, stealing something, a deal that's done, undermining that deal and taking that deal, you lack creativity. Right? And the moment I don't think big enough on my income, I will lack creativity where all the solutions, I lack commitment, which will produce the creativity necessary to get those extra deals. The money exists. The potential is there. The opportunity is there. Your space is enormous. What I have to do, whether I'm going into a new sales job, making a sales call myself, or whether I'm trying to start a new business or a new division, is I have to start with the top line of the business, okay? As a salesperson, salespeople sometimes don't think in terms of top lines. They think in terms of their sales. I would tell you to create a department, okay? And your department would be a new business for yourself. And going into 2019 and 2020, you would say, hey, what could I do between March? Are we still in March? Or April? We in April? We're in April, okay? So April to April, the next 12 months, not the last 8 months, April to April, how would I build a $4 million business? How could I do that? How many customers would I need? How many phone calls would I have to make? How many letters out? How many contacts? How many visits? If the $4 million is real, okay, is the $4 million real? Is it real? No, I can't hear you. Is it real? Yes. God damn, y'all don't need to wait till you drink to get excited. You better get excited now, because if you're not going to get excited now, nobody will give you this money. Nobody will give you this money. Money follows attention. How much attention can I get in the marketplace is where money goes. Money does not go to the best product, ever. Money does not go to the best product. Money does not go to the happiest place either. Money goes to where attention goes. Whoever gets the most attention gets the most money. Action, massive action, has always worked. It's proven itself for thousands of years. This is not a new concept. You show me somebody, and we know their name, anybody in the room, any famous person that you can think of. Anybody that we would both know. You say, I'm going to mention their name, and Grant will know who that is. Give me a name of one person. Tiger Woods. Massive action. Persistent, massive action. Okay? Okay, how many people were watching the Open yesterday? Yeah, exactly. Why? Because Tiger was in it. Attention. Money follows attention. Money follows attention. How much attention can you get? Even bad attention. Okay, I'm going to tell you something. What Tiger went through in the last decade helped him. You got more white people pulling for Tiger Woods, right? They're like, Tiger, grown white men, Tiger. And we say there's division in this country. Tiger, I love Tiger, right? Why? Because they love a comeback, man. The guy got a lot of attention. Okay, who else? Give me another name. Oh, my God. I didn't know it was going to be this kind of meeting. If I didn't know it was going to be this kind of meeting, I'd charge you double. Donald Trump. Everybody knows him, okay? Money follows attention. Success and power follow attention. Okay, you can not like the guy, but could you handle that much heat every day? Could you handle that many people not liking you every day? Because if you're going to be a leader, if you're going to be a real leader, okay, if you're going to be at the top of the food chain kind of leader, people aren't going to like you. Thank you so much for having me today, Bob. Thank you so much. Thank you. Okay, appreciate you guys. Thank Hey, all new content free at cardoneu.com, cardoneu.com, all new content. How to get a job in under 72 hours. We already had our first big success. How to get the PPP money, how to get the SBA money, how to take your business and blow it up and turn a crisis into expansion. Over 2,000 videos, 45 million logins, all new content just for you and free by clicking the link below, okay? Enjoy it. Let's go blow your business up.
Hello and welcome to the G&E Show. We come to you every Wednesday. How's quarantine life going for you? I know for us it can be extremely challenging, is a good word. Being kind of on top of each other, having to operate out of the office.
Confined to the home.
A home, but like, I'm sorry, officing out of the home is a little bit of a challenge.
Loco. We're nuts right now, okay? We're nuts.
I'm going crazy. I think my daddy going crazy.
No, you ain't going crazy. You are crazy,
I
okay?
am loco. I am crazy. I am home all day long.
And most people are, right? Most people are having you got a husband, wife, boyfriend, girlfriend, boyfriend, whatever the combination is, at home all day long. Like, that's too much time with another human being, folks. Like, bang, okay? There gotta be some relief in this deal. They're talking about people getting sick, suicide rates going up, people calling alcohol consumption. Yeah, it ain't cause of COVID. It's because you spend too much time with the same person that you committed to your life to, and you're like, God damn, I did not know all this about her.
Is that true?
Oh yeah.
Okay, what's happening
Well,
for
I'll
you?
tell you some of the stuff for me. You guys call in, 305-865-8668, 305-865-8668. I shaved my head.
Okay, but how
Okay, I start doing the buzzer, and I'm like, a little bit here, a little bit there. Next thing I know, you bring kittens home.
So is that what freaked you out, where you were like, I don't know about this
If that was all, it would be one thing. But like, it's more than that. It's like, I come home after being here at the studio, doing some work here at the office.
Yes, you are not home all day.
I get off the elevator, walk into my home that is normally open. Doors are open, wide open, and I see you sitting there at your desk.
Right,
which
is now the bar.
No, it was our bar.
It was our bar. Now it's my office.
Yeah, and she's got her lights set up. She's doing an Instagram live. So I've heard more other people's Instagram lives, watched more people's videos. Like, I can't get away from it, dude. It's just driving me nuts.
So what drives you nuts about it? That your space that you're used to? Like, is it the change of the familiarity? The routine's different?
I used to walk in the morning. I used to wake up in the morning. I get out of my bedroom. I go into the great room. It's nice and clean and orderly. Now there's like an office in there. I go into the kitchen. Used to be my kitchen. Last night I had to do an Instagram live from my kitchen because you were doing something in the great room. Like, I can't get away from you. You can't get away from me.
That's true. And you're a lot louder than I am, by the way. Your voice is like, whoa, like a microphone in the whole house.
Yeah, well, okay. So like, and I looked it up online about people working together. It's like dealing with the little things. Yeah. Why is anybody dealing with little shit right now? I'm worried about the whole world going bankrupt.
Right.
Okay, this week we've had major bankruptcies. We got the airlines saying they're going to lay off United Airlines is going to lay off 3,000 more people in October. Uber's dropping 3,700 people off. I walk in this morning and tell you, Uber's dropping 3,700 people, and you're doing something already.
I'm working on my men's book. Thank you to all my men out there.
But I would normally still have your attention in the morning because when you take the office and the home and drop it off into one place, there's never a separation. Like there's never a now everything is just feels like this big fucking gumbo.
Whoa.
Soup.
I love gumbo.
I know, but it's like this gumbo was made with everything available.
So you're telling me about Uber, the 3,700
Yeah,
people.
and you're not really available. You're not listening.
But was it, yeah, okay, I hear you. I was confused about it, first of all, when you said,
all new content, how to get a job in under 72 hours. We already had our first big success. How to get money, how to get the SBA money, how to take your business and blow it up and turn a crisis into expansion. Over 2,000 videos, 45 million logins, all new content just for you and free by clicking the link below. Okay, enjoy it. Let's go blow your business up. Welcome, welcome to the Cardone Zone. Some guy.
Firearms auction, and today we're going to take a look at a craft-made North Vietnamese pistol. Now, most of the standard arms used by the North Vietnamese in the Vietnam War were some really good condition, well-made Chinese military aid. So AKs, SKSs, Tokarev pistols, good stuff. However, at the opposite end of that spectrum, there were indigenous craft-made firearms. These are situations where guys really apparently couldn't get their hands on anything factory produced in China or elsewhere, and they needed firearms, and so they resorted to what they had. And this one is really interesting because it shows both manufacturing and engineering techniques, or lack thereof, that are stereotypical of this sort of pistol, and it's a neat one to look at. So let's just dive straight in and take a closer look at this and pull it apart. All right, so I've got this Vietnamese pistol here side by side with a proper, very nice American 1911. And if you squint, they look pretty much the same. So I've adjusted the camera out of focus to give you that perspective. And from here,
Ну чё, пацанчики? Ну-ка, блядь, все сюда ко мне! А вот тут кореш мой бывал точно. Ну что, неплохие деньги, господа.
Yep, cool. You have made a 1911. Now, when we actually look at it up close, we'll start to see some issues. So, obvious things we can start with. We know this is a copy of the 1911. All the distinctive features, the grips, these cutouts, slide stop, magazine, safety, hammer. This is clearly someone gave, whoever made this, we'll call him the craftsman. Someone gave the craftsman in 1911, gave them this, and said, make me more of these. And the guy said, okay, I don't really know how that works, but I see what the pieces are, and I can take it apart, and we'll do our best here. So, hammer, for example, still works, does exactly what it's supposed to, but the profile's a bit different than a 1911. Safety, total failure. We have, complete failure on the safety because it pivots on a pin here and is held in place by a screw, and it does not move, and it does nothing whatsoever. But it does look like a safety. It's got that little thumb stop. Maybe the guy thought that was like a thumb rest for your hand. The magazine catch, unfortunately, is missing from this pistol. We'll mention that right now. And it looks like it was made the same way as a standard 1911. Someone has added this little aluminum plate that simply holds the magazine in place. So that's why that's on there. Someone added that after the gun came back to the U.S. Now, the slide stop looks correct, but it doesn't offer you any way to hold the pistol open. There is no slide lock on this pistol. That is simply a pin that holds the barrel in place. So this is a single function piece on this gun. On a 1911, it's a multi-function piece that also acts as a slide stop. The serial number on this is 230,777. I am extremely dubious that they ever made 200,000 of these. I suspect that this is someone who looked at a 1911 and said, there are 6 numbers stamped on the side of it. I'm not sure what those numbers mean, but I guess they're important, so we'll stamp 6 numbers on the side of this one. And that's what you get there. Unlike some craft-made pistols, this one does actually have functional sights, and the rear sight is pretty much just as small and useless as on an original 1911. And if we look at the back of the slide, we can see it's not very precisely manufactured, but we do have the extractor plunger, and we have a firing pin, and the firing pin even works. If we look at the muzzle, we can see it's sort of halfway there. It doesn't have a bushing, but it does have this textured recoil spring plug, although the reason that this was textured was so that you can push it in, rotate the bushing out of the way, and remove it. And you can't do any of this on this pistol because the front of the slide is all one piece. Now, if you look closely, you can see that there's a seam there. This gun is brazed together. It's not welded. As far as I can tell, I don't think it's welded anywhere. So this is manufactured with crude tools, mill lathe files, I suspect, and then the pieces are actually brazed together. So if we look down here, all this yellow color you see is brazing.